Hello there and welcome. Today we have a 480E on the bench, yet another one. However, this one's a little bit different, kind of an odd situation. This is a do-it-yourself build by my customer. He rebuilt this transmission completely following my videos, parts recommendations, and guidance that I had been giving him kind of throughout the process. And when he went to install it, he noticed that upon putting it in gear, there was like almost no engagement. Like, you barely feel anything. It was super soft. And if you guys know anything about, well, automatic transmissions in general, but 480s in particular, and along with their TH400 ancestors, when you put them in gear, I mean, you'll know it. You'll have a nice firm engagement into drive or reverse, as well as all of the manual positions. So he knew immediately something was wrong and reached out to me and said, hey, here's my situation. I got really soft engagement. The thing doesn't want to move at all on its own power on a flat surface. What should I do? And I told him to perform a line pressure test and determine if there was some sort of line pressure deficiency condition inside the unit. And sure enough, we found that there was. He had good pressures at idle, but once he got off idle, maybe 1500 to 2000 RPMs, there was basically no line rise whatsoever. And so he followed all of the instructions procedurally, as well as from a parts recommendation perspective that I put out there, but the only thing he was not able to do was vacuum test the hydraulics, so the stator support and the valve body. And so we're going to take it down. We're going to see if there's anything we can learn based on the way it was put together, and then I'm going to go ahead and clean off the valve body, get the stator support cleaned off, and we're going to vacuum test those two things to see if there's any deficiencies there. He replaced all the electrical components with brand new ones, and like I said, following everything that I do. And it sounds like he put this together as he should. I mean, the proof's going to be in the pudding once we take it apart, but suffice to say, that's what we're working with. So I know it's a long-winded introduction, but I'm going to take this apart a little bit more methodically than what I usually do, instead of just rip-roaring through it, so to speak, because I want to be able to see exactly what was done and determine if there was anything at all, either from an assembly perspective or just from maybe issues with parts that could potentially cause his problem. Defective EPC is a possibility, and or actuator feed limit valve being overly weak. I mean, that's a very common problem for 480Es. This thing came out of a 2003 Savannah van, supposedly with only about 125,000 miles on it, something like that. When he had initially dropped the pan, he noticed that the fluid was clean, nothing remarkable about it. And the seller had informed him that the vehicle was running at the time that it was pulled. I'm not sure why or what the backstory is there, but suffice to say, this transmission didn't have any issues apparently once it was pulled out. It was working. So anyway, I know it's kind of long-winded, an introduction. Usually I try to keep it short and sweet, but I wanted to give you the background here so that you know what's going on. Alright, now he's got some Allen head fasteners on here. A lot of rust built up on them. Not sure how that got that way, but 5/16 on these bolts. So all new bushings were installed, new frictions, new seals, the works, the whole nine. He installed a Sonex billet forward clutch hub, billet rollized forward clutch hub, and several other kind of performance go fast parts. So he does have a new bushing here, I believe. Kind of hard to tell. And the bushing does have some wear on it. I would hate to have to remove this seal because it's in perfect shape, but I'm already seeing appears to be some burnt clutch material there, so it's not a good sign. He did not drive this. When he started it up, put it in gear, he realized there was some sort of issue, and exercising caution, he realized that it was in no shape for a test drive. Alright, so he's got the sleeve here. Snap ring appears to be installed in its groove. And then you can see little traces of assembly lube and, you know, again, a little bit more evidence of burnt clutches. Alright, new speed sensors installed. So, again, always replace your electronics, your electrical components. Never reuse this stuff. Every once in a blue moon, you will get a dead on arrival electrical part. It's very, very rare, but it does happen. And you'll know it if you have a condition like this. If, say, you have the EPC not functioning as it should, stopping way too much line pressure down, not allowing for line rise and so forth. So I believe this is part of a low car shift linkage kit. So I didn't mention already, the truck is an 86 C10. He's actually currently doing a step side conversion to it now. Neat looking truck. He's got a built, I believe, 6-liter in there. And he's making something like 500, 550 horse. Again, the details are kind of fuzzy, but yeah, he's fully building this truck up. So, alright, he's got A&N fittings here. I'm going to take off the outer fitting, and then we got to remove the inner fittings so that we can get the gear train out. Get that off of there. And then I think that's the inboard might be 19. Oh no, it's 3/4. So 3/4 for both of these fasteners. He's got a deep pan on here. I'm curious to see if there is a filter pickup extension tube. Not having that can also cause low line pressure conditions because you're just not sucking up enough fluid into the system, into the pump. You know, I mean, that's certainly a possibility. We'll see. But a priori, I would say the problem is somewhere in the hydraulics. You know, very, very worn bore, either in the PR valve or the actuator feed limit valve. I mean, those are always going to be your two primary suspects when you have line pressure issues in an electronically controlled transmission, assuming all the electrical components were replaced. But I mean, that is an assumption because, well, we don't know until we test, and that's kind of the purpose of what we're doing here. Alright, it's got some fluid in there, obviously. Alright, here is going to be for his transmission temperature gauge that's, you know, kind of wired into the pan there and routed into the, you know, driver's cockpit area. I'm going to get the seal off. And then end play on these should be 4 to 22 thousandths in the rear and then 5 to 25 thousandths in the front net of the snap ring groove. I'm going to try to force that output shaft all the way inboard. And then this comes out. This has a billet steel input shaft, 300M billet steel. Alright, it's actually hard to tell, but all I appear to be feeling is the snap ring groove gap between the overdrive carrier assembly, the input shaft, and the snap ring itself that's securing it to the overdrive planet. Alright, I'm going to try to preserve his harness, so I'm not going to do what I usually do, which is just punch it in. So he's got a nice TCI pan on here. Okay, these take 6 millimeter fasteners. So let's see if there's a filter pickup extension tube. Alright, I'm not sure what the torque spec is on these, you know, for the TCI stuff. B&M has you torque their pan bolts to 130 inch-pounds, I believe. So this thing was shipped to me from Hawaii. That's where the customer lives. And that in and of itself was a complete and total nightmare. I had chosen the freight carrier, and they ended up losing this transmission, for about a week. They had no idea where it was, and they eventually were able to locate it, but that bolt was loose, as was this one. Those two bolts were loose. I noticed a little bit of moisture around the pan. Maybe those weren't tightened, because the rest of these clearly were. But anyway, yeah, a lot of sleepless nights for the customer, and to some extent myself. We were already kind of talking about prepping a potential legal case for him so that he could pursue the matter legally in the courts if the freight carrier wouldn't make good on the lost shipment. But fortunately, none of that was necessary. They did find it. Alright. So look at the pan. We have quite a lot of burnt material here. I'm not really sure where this is from, or what the source of all this material is, but it's pretty thick for something with no miles on it. You'll notice that there is no filter pickup extension tube. That may have been part of the problem. It may have been all the problem. Like I said, if you're not getting enough suction, enough fluid volume, going into the pump, you're not going to have appropriate line pressure rise. Another quick gander at it before to the side. Alright, he has a reusable gasket. I always recommend these as well. This apparently is going to be brand new, so we'll just clean it off and put it back on. And then we have assembly lube. So like I said, this thing literally has no miles on it whatsoever. We're going to replace the filter, but notice the filter's dry. In other words, yeah, it's soaked through fluid, but there's no fluid inside the filter. So unless he took the pan off, which I don't think he did, he would have drained the fluid via the drain plug. This could very well be the source of his issue. Just not having the filter, at the appropriate depth, where it should be. Now, notice here, the pan does have cast bosses to support the filter, so it could be that this thing is designed to be at the factory depth without the use of a pickup extension tube. I've never used a TCI pan, so that's why I'm kind of guessing, speculating. I sound like I'm not sure because I'm not. I always use B&M pans, and they have the filter pickup extension tube, and that's what I'm used to seeing and using, and that's what I know. All right, so clearly all the electronics have been replaced, just like he said. Everything's plugged in. So like I said, we're going to try to preserve this harness. I don't want to break it or damage it. I'm trying to keep the spend low here. Given all that he's already put into this thing, we want to, we don't want to waste money where we don't have to. Come on. This one doesn't want to come out. Alright. I'm going to force it. So here's your electronic pressure control solenoid. It's clearly brand new, 03 and up, silver can version from Bosch. This is going to be your TCC PWM solenoid, and an inboard of this is going to be the TCC regulator valve. I believe he put a Sonex valve in here. So that addresses one major area of weakness in these transmissions. The torque converter clutch regulator valve. Most of the shift kits that you can buy for 4LEDs will come with a gently oversized drop-in valve so that it can kind of restore a worn out bore. There we go. I don't know why that was so difficult, but it was. And it's going to be entirely due to my lack of technique, unfortunately. I'll put that over there. We'll clean that with the electrical QD cleaner later. Alright, rest of the bolts are all 10 millimeter, 98 to 104 inch-pounds on all these bolts. Alright, he did have a block-off plate included with the shipment, and he also had a brand new band that was loose in the box as well. He had said that he could not get the gear train in with the new band, and so he reinstalled the pre-existing band that he said was in good shape. And a lot of professional shops do that as well. They consider that reverse band to be a hard part. And so far, all these bolts are nice and tight. Alright, and I don't know if you're going to be able to see it from where you're at, but this is where you can find the year of the casting number. So 03 indicates a 2003 model year valve body. So he did put some Sonex parts into the valve body. We'll have to see exactly what those parts are once we have it off and have the accumulator housing off. I want to see how he calibrated the spacer plate. He's going to be running I want to say a 3000 stall torque converter. So he's keeping the accumulators active. I would guess he will have drilled the 2.3 and 3.4 shift feed orifices to like somewhere between 100 and 110 thousandths. If you're going to delete them or block them off, then you want to do something like 93 thousandths for that range of stall speed, 28 to 3200 or so. And we're going to install the block off plate. In high performance situations, especially if we're dual feeding the direct clutch, you really don't want to have those 2.3 and 3.4 accumulator circuits active. You want to delete them, get rid of them. It simplifies the hydraulic circuitry and makes it easier to mechanically calibrate the transmission based on your needs. Alright, so he's got all the check balls installed. These are going to be your number 5 and 6 check balls for your accumulators for for third and fourth gear. And then let's see, it looks like this check ball is not there. This check ball may not be there either. Oh wait, looks like there's a check ball down here, so that presumably would have went here. I'll flash a diagram on the screen that shows all the check balls in their respective locations. You can delete the number 8 check ball and the number 9 check balls as well for direct clutch and low reverse respectively. They're flow control check balls. So anytime you have a flow control check ball, it can be removed provided you know what you're doing and the impact that would have on the behavior of the transmission. 8 millimeter on these bolts. Alright, so I believe he put Sonex springs in here in lieu of the factory versions. Okay, yep, these are indeed Sonex's accumulator springs, so we'll go ahead and put these in a plastic bag for him and send them back. Along with those bolts. So here are the accumulator pistons. I mean, not anything you haven't seen before. I'll need shop air to blow this one out, but You can see a lot of residue. I mean, this could be assembly lube as well, but it's got some like granulated metal in there, so I don't think it's all assembly lube. Alright, we got 2 new shift solenoids, A and B, new PWM solenoid, new EPC as I mentioned. There's your spacer plate to case gasket. All of these, well, this one, so in most of the overhaul kits, they're going to give you your early design spacer plate to case gasket, though it looks like this one is a late design gasket. And I say that because over here on the early designs, there's a blowhole location as well as a cutout for your feed tube that runs from this location here on the valve body all the way back to the case on those 91 to 96 traditional lubrication design units. This is a center lube design, meaning freshly cooled oil or transmission fluid gets plumbed and piped directly into the gear train upon going through the cooling system. Alright, let's grab up all these check balls. And then we'll take a look at the spacer plate real quick and see how that was calibrated. So ideally, you know, hopefully all of this friction material is from his low reverse band. If that's the case, that band is going to get thrown out anyway. You know, I mean, he reused it, that's fine, you know, but I don't ever reuse that stuff. Alright, let's see what we have here for calibration. So factory plate. So this is going to be your 1-2 shift, or the 1-2 feed. Looks like he drilled that to, I'm going to say it looks like 93 thousandths. And he may have drilled this to also 93 thousandths. So this is going to be 2nd gear, 3rd gear, and 4th gear. So 4th gear, I like to drill that to 82 thousandths when I'm blocking the accumulator, but since he kept it active, it looks like he drilled at 93, which is perfectly fine. I mean, the delta between accumulated versus unaccumulated apply circuits is worth about 10 thousandths of an inch if you're trying to maintain the same level of shift firmness and or shift speed, if you will. Alright, let's take a look at the valve body, see if we can discern anything with it all nasty and dirty. I'll zoom in on it so that I don't have to bring it close to the camera and get fluid all over the floor. Alright, that zooming in crap wasn't working out. Alright, so this is going to be our TCC regulator valve. That does look factory. It could be Transgo, but it looks factory to me. Here is the 3rd and reverse check ball capsule and your 3/4 upshift valve. Actuator feed limit valve is going to be here, and then your accumulator valve is going to be here. So of particular interest in the valve body is going to be the AFL valve and that EPC, that electronic pressure control solenoid. So let me go get my multimeter real quick and we'll just do a continuity check on it and see if anything odd pops up. Like I said, it's brand new. And DOA solenoids, while not unheard of, are relatively rare. There was a period back in like the 2010 to 2013 where Borg Warner was producing bad solenoids, and the defect rate was unusually high. But since then, it hasn't been a problem. So 4 to 6 ohms is what we want to see. Your resistance values will vary based on ambient temperature. So the higher the temperature, the higher the value or reading will be on your multimeter, up to a certain limit, assuming the thing is functional. Assuming there's nothing wrong with it. Alright, so let's see what we have. So it looks like 5.2 ohms. Superficially it appears to be fine. So 5.2 is right where it needs to be. So we'll go ahead and put this valve body in the pan. The spacer plate in there as well. And I gotta knock off that that tube here. Oil slinger or what have you. Alright, I want to keep this harness healthy. You know, I'm trying not to break it. I have a special tool that I'll use to actually extract it, collapsing the locking tabs so that they don't break. And you know, just wipe it off with some quick dry electrical cleaner. So here's our low reverse servo. Alright, he did dual feed the direct clutch internally on this unit. So there's a little cup plug in this location, as you can see, or maybe you can't. I'll zoom in on it. This looks like a piece of valve body or spacer plate, the case gasket. Don't think that would play any role in his issue, but yep, he's got the billet servo. This is always recommended, especially for these late model units that take the dome style piston. They started this in 1996, and the reason why that's recommended is because the factory pistons have a tendency to crack in this location here, right at the top of the dome, and when that occurs, you lose reverse. I still see some assembly lube in there. It appears to be assembled correctly. So just kind of feeling around this seal here. It, you know, brand new. Doesn't feel like any different than any other seal. So if you want to ascertain your band clearance, you have to do it, you know, kind of via an inferential measurement in the form of servo travel. And what you would do is you would place a dial caliper that'll give you a depth reading, and then you'll push this all the way in. You obviously don't want the seal on when you're doing this, and you're going to take your reading right here, and you want to see between 125 and 175 thousandths of depth from this part of the case to the outer radius right here. So you'll measure it right here. Alright, so far I don't see anything obvious to me that could be, you know, serve an explanation for what we saw or what his symptoms, as he relayed them to me, you know, why they're happening. But like I said, I mean, my guess is that the problem lies somewhere in the valve body or the pump. I mean, it's got to be your first inclination when you have a line pressure condition. Alright, if this was like an older TV-based system, like a 700R4, you would suspect sticking throttle valve. And I've seen my fair share of those. Alright, so 15 millimeter on this nut. And we need a Torx 40 for the overdrive feed bolt and a 3/8 12-point socket for the center support feed bolt for intermediate clutch. Alright, just real quick, bit of trivia. The late rooster combs are different than the early ones. The early ones don't have this square cutout in the middle of the rooster comb. And they're designed to work with the short shafts, 94 and back. 95 and up, they introduced the manual lever position sensor in these units, and so they changed both the rooster comb as well as the selector shaft making it longer to accommodate the presence of the MLPS. I'm not sure how he's controlling this transmission. I don't think he uses an MLPS, but I could be wrong, I didn't ask. Alright, leave this little spring here in place so that the parking pole does not interfere with the gear train when you're trying to pull it out of the case. So, let me get this thing off here. Not a big fan of these oil slingers. There's an O-ring that goes in there, that'll be replaced. Alright, let me go get those other sockets. So like I said, slow and ponderous because I want to see if there's anything that I need to see upon disassembly so that I don't miss anything. I mean, it would really suck if there was something important that I needed to catch and I didn't because I'm going too fast. I mean, that's kind of my problem with teardowns when filming especially, is that I tend to go a little too fast and I miss stuff. I mean, I'll annotate or go back and film a segment if it's that important, but, include it in the main video, but still, I'd rather not have that situation. Alright, so here's the pump to case gasket. You can see it's kind of bowed out a little bit, so I'm curious to see if somehow the pump to case gasket got pinched on installation of the pump. But, I mean, that's a pretty thin theory, to be honest. But you never know. 13 millimeter. Alright, to get the pump out, all you need to do is come with a pry bar like so, right in this area here, and then just pry forward. Alright, he's got a sonic boost valve in here, and he may have installed a lube regulated PR valve as well. Let's take a look at the gasket. So it definitely got pinched in and around this area, but I don't see any tears in it. I mean, I don't think that this would have been the source of the issue. Alright, we're going to have to spend money on a paper rubber kit, obviously. I wouldn't reuse any gaskets or seals or, stuff like that. So let's go ahead and get the pump apart. So a new bushing has been installed here in the stator, the rear stator position. And a new bushing here in the front, though it looks a little marred up. Alright, 13 millimeter on these bolts. 15 to 18 foot-pounds on both this set of bolts as well as pump the case. I think you can actually go 15 to 20. Alright, he's got a shim under here along with a selective washer. Actually, he has two shims. Two shims. Alright, let's see how thick this this washer is. So 93 thousandths. 93 thousandths. And he's got 21 thousandths worth of shims. Alright, we'll see if those are needed once we go back in with it. So let's look at the working surfaces. Pump gears look good. No scoring. I wonder if this crescent is wore out. Now let me zoom in again. This crescent looks pretty worn to me. I mean, it could be just the, you know, the visual pattern in the casting, but it looks worn to me. I think I'm gonna have him replace this body. So wear in the crescent will absolutely cause volumetric flow conditions. In other words, it will not produce enough volume so that the various hydraulic management control systems in the unit, as well as the ECM, will not be able to produce the line pressure in proportion or lockstep with throttle angle, and that will absolutely cause a low line rise condition. So, while I didn't mention it initially, this is now my lead suspect. I think this is wore out. Alright, let me change the battery. Alright, so hopefully this is coming through for you. New battery in. So, get a little bit closer. Yeah, I mean, you can see right here at the very top of the crescent, there's like a divot. Or maybe you can't see it, but you can certainly feel it. And you can see all the wear here. So I think this, honestly, is probably his problem. Alright, bring it back here real quick. The working surface at the base looks okay. You know, obviously, given it's dirty, it's kind of hard to tell, but get this over enough. Kind of hard to tell, but it looks okay. However, the crescent being shot would absolutely cause line pressure problems inside the unit. Now, if the metal that we saw earlier in the pan came from that crescent, then that speaks to another issue, and that is usually driven by either the engine or the flex plate or something else. If you have worn main bearings, then you will have pronounced wear on the crescent. Now let's take a look at these gears. I don't believe these are replaced. These look like the original gears to me. And What I'm doing is I'm looking at the patterns here that I see visually on the crests of the teeth, as well as on the sides of each tooth on the driving driven gear. I mean, they look okay. A little bit of wear here, but nothing pronounced on the face. This is going to be the side that faces up or U with the dots. You want the converter flats offset to the rear. The flats themselves look in good shape. Just a little bit of wear here on this one side. I mean, we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna put a new body, and the bodies come with a brand new set of gears. So the gears are machined to the body. That selector out. All right. So for the stator support, we're gonna need to clean this off and vacuum test it. The working surface on here looks okay. Because this is a hydraulic condition or problem, I want to spend more time on the pump than I normally would on a tear down. I want to see if this surface is flat or not. So I'm going to take a 1/1000 feeler gauge. That's 4/1000. It's my 1/1000, so I think this is it. Yeah, this is, I'm holding the 1/1000 feeler gauge. So let's see if it goes underneath the straight edge. If it does, then we'll have to turn the stator support, which is no big deal. It's wanting to peek underneath. Yeah, this thing's gonna have to be turned. Yep. So this stator support surface is certainly not flat. So all my 4L80s, 4L60s, etc., all, you know, there's at least one piece of machine work being done on the pump. Most of the time, the pump has to be completely remachined, reconditioned, or in the case of the pump body, replaced. Because okay, I have you zoomed in on the line to lube hole that the customer drilled here in the pump cover. And you want to drill this hole if you're going to run the factory pressure regulator valve, and you want to drill it to between 45 and 55 thousandths. I typically use 55 thousandths. This is a 55 thousandths drill bit. Alright, as you can see, there is an enormous amount of space between this drill bit and that hole. Here's a 75 thousandths drill bit. So 75 is not quite fitting if I put it in backwards, but if I put it in the correct way, as you can see, there's still an enormous amount of gap. So I'm guessing that the opening on this side is about 110 thousandths, and it doesn't look to narrow at any point before the hole comes through the other side. So I'm going to conclude that I found the reason as to why this thing had such poor line rise characteristics that it did. This hole is drilled way too large, and when you drill a hole this big, you're going to have a massive amount of pressure loss in the in the system. So between the stator, this hole, and the condition of the priming crescent on the pump body, we basically need to replace the pump. I don't think I'm going to find anything remarkable when I do valve body testing, and I probably won't find anything remarkable when I test the stator support, but between the warp surface here, this hole being ginormous, and the worn crescent, I'm confident I've identified the reason for the low line rise. Alright, so let's go ahead and move on, get the rest of the case apart. Alright, what we have here is a Sonic's valve train. So you have your boost valve and sleeve with the O-rings, and then you have the spring. along with the lube regulated pressure regulator valve. In fact, the only two things that are still factory here are the spring seat for the outboard position and the little bumper spring. So I use this PR valve all the time. It's a great design, and it allows you to achieve that full-time line to lube by virtue of just installing this valve. Not only do you not need to drill this little 55 thousandths hole in the pump cover to achieve the same, you actually do not want to drill this location at all if you're going to install this valve. If you do, you're going to create too much of a good thing, so to speak, which means an excessive line pressure loss, and so that will translate into your inability to build any line rise when you go to try to drive the vehicle. And because he over drilled this hole to such an extent, he had no line rise even off idle. Usually it'll show up as a poor line rise condition at higher throttle angles, which will translate to slipping or flare shifting, especially second to third gear, or maybe third to fourth gear as well. That's assuming you do drill this hole maybe 50 thousandths and you install this valve. In my experiences with customers who have done the same, that is what they have been, they have reported to me. But because this was drilled to something like 100 thousandths or something like that, and he installed this valve at the same time, we had a total loss of line rise. So just be advised, if you're going to run this valve, which it's not cheap, these are like 90 bucks or so, if you buy them separately, or they come as part of the HP1 performance pack, which is ultimately what was installed in this transmission. You do not want to drill the casting under any circumstances. So you're really looking at the beginning, the end of the problem here, as far as all the issues he had with pressure and super soft engagements and no line rise. The warp working surface and the cover, along with the worn crescent, would have materialized as higher to wide open throttle angle flare shifts, slips, and losses of pressure. But normal street driving, he probably wouldn't have experienced too many concerns. But given what he had done here and installed this valve, that was kind of like a 1-2 punch for line pressure inside the unit. So again, if you're going to install this valve, do not drill your pump cover for line to lube. I'm thinking we found the source of his problem. We'll take the rest of it down and have a look at everything. So here's the overdrive carrier, brand new sealing rings, so billet input shaft. I can't remember whose shaft he told me this was, but most of them are 300M, which is fine for up to about 1,000 horsepower, and then you want aromatic steel for anything beyond that. So, in fact, you know what? I'm going to put this back on. I just want to show you the play that exists. Now, this snap ring, you want to orient it or put it on such that this smooth side faces you and the cut side faces the planet. Great. Let's do it this way. Alright, so we have a large amount of gap between the snap ring and the carrier. This thing felt really tight to me, and all I felt was this gap here when I was pulling and pushing on the input shaft before I took it all apart. And so he may have had a bind in the case. You basically want a net of at least, I would say at least 4 thousandths of in play in the front compared to the rear and this gap here that I'm showing you with the snap ring. And this is, honestly, this might be one of the biggest gaps I've ever seen. They're normally in the factory snap ring with the factory shaft, you'll have something like between 10 and 30 thousandths. That's what I have seen over the years, 10 and 30. It's like a good estimate for range of snap ring groove gap. So you have extended splines. a little set screw there or something, which I see on most of the billet shafts. Very nice looking shaft. The snap rings are in perfect condition. No need to do anything with those. So this is also interesting. This shouldn't be like this. So let me take this off. He would have had other problems with this thing. Let's get the clutch out and then I'll put this back on. But I'm thinking he has an early carrier, at least with the larger style race, intended for a large roller one-way overdrive clutch, but he put a small roller clutch in there. Yeah, I mean, it feels exactly the same. So this and the inner race are not making any contact with each other at all. That's no good. A lot of clearance in here. I mean, you can have up to 90 and it looks like it's at least that. So we have Red Eagle clutches and choline steels, 3 and 3. They look brand new. Okay, no, we're good. I thought maybe he did, and that's why I wanted to do this. I thought maybe I just didn't have this fully seated, but it looks like it's fine. Alright, so this is rotation. It freewheels counterclockwise and locks clockwise. So we're good here, no mistakes made there. He said that this roller clutch assembly is brand new, so no need to replace it. If so, I mean, he gave me a whole parts list of everything that he installed into this thing. And like I said, it's pretty much a carbon copy of how I build them, for power levels like his. So let's take a look at the overdrive clutch. Come on. So I see more Alto Reds and choline. They look in good shape, brand new. I'm not going to take the overdrive housing apart. I will air check it. Obviously everything will be air checked before anything goes back in, but and then the case will be air checked as well. However, I wouldn't imagine I would encounter any issues. So let's go ahead and grab the forward drum. I think this bearing might be upside down. Yeah, it's supposed to be like this. I mean, that's not the end of the world. Obviously, it's not going to cause his line pressure condition. One thing I will recommend to him is that we install an Omega machine wide forward sun gear bushing in this location. And you just pop this out with a bushing puller and put the new one in that's wide. He's got the billet steel rollerized forward clutch hub, as you can see. And then I do see some wear here. He said he checked the wear in the inner diameter of the drum, but I do see some wear. Alright. So what I'm looking for here in terms of the gap, or the drop between the ledge and the top friction, I want to see that it's not inordinate. You don't want this friction higher than the ledge. Obviously you'll have a bind, or at least you'll have insufficient clearance, but you don't want it to be any more than what it appears to be here. So forward clutch, 40 to 60 thousandths is fine for clearance. So this is not a Sonex part. This might be Cone Racing. This might be a Cone Racing hub. Either way, it's a good hub. It's got dual rollers. The Sonex hub has you reuse the bronze thrust washer that goes in here. This one obviously is machined to accept 2 Torrington bearings. Let's check the condition of the frictions. Let's see what he has in here. See something big down there. Let's see. Okay, so we got, this might be a power pack. That's what it looks like to me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you'll notice the steels are very thin, much thinner than the 70 or 75 thousandths thick factory forward clutch steel plates, and these are 60 thousandths. Everything looks to be in good shape to me. So it has what I would call a riser, or a riser plate of some sort to bring the pack into specification. You notice he's got Hyper Blue pistons, so high performance blue from Seal Aftermarket. I use them as well. He's got the snap ring engaged on all 4 locking bosses, just like I always preach to people. So good all around so far. I don't know why I did that. Put these over here. So let's take a look at the inner diameter. As you can see, there's some sizable wear here that I could see, and that I would want to treat now versus wait until it gets worse. And he has, like, no forward engagement, the clutch burns up, and so forth. So I'm gonna have him have this drum sleeved. So what happens is the machine will still go in, he'll bore this inner diameter out and install a ductile iron sleeve in there, so that you have basically a brand new surface, and you will not have any risk of forward clutch burnup due to ring cut in the inner diameter. So I don't know to what extent he has access to machining out there. I know that nobody in his area had a vacuum tester. He lives in Hawaii, I guess, in a more of a rural area, and there's just not a lot of resources for this kind of work. Not a lot of service providers that can do what needs to be done. All right, so here's a direct drum. Let's see what's in here. May have another power pack, and I think I see high rate return springs, so it's always good. At his power level, I'm not sure that he would need the auxiliary bleed orifice in the drum, but let's see if he drilled it. I don't know if that's it or not. Here's the factory bleed. This may be an auxiliary right here. So you always want to check the inner diameter of these drums for ring cut as well, for the sealing rings on the center support. This drum looks in good shape. Actually, he's got something here, right there, that may be of concern. I'll have to inspect it a little more closely, but he's got the hyper blue bonded piston in the direct as well. The backing plate looks in good shape, basically new, and I believe a power pack has been installed. So let's see how many frictions and steels. He's got a support plate. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 and 7 plus the support plate to bring the clearance up to where it needs to be, or maybe this is a wavy plate. Yep, this is a wavy plate. So it's actually good to use wavies in the directs, even if you're racing or doing something performance oriented, because it helps cushion the spin down of the direct drum when it shifts into third gear, because that drum's spinning super fast in first gear and to a large extent second gear. Alright, here's our coast band. Looks fine. It's a late band, so it's going to be wider. You can retro a late band into an earlier 4L80, but you need to also retro the intermediate band servo with it. You can't just retro the band without the servo. Alright, so he's got a Sonic's case saver installed. And also a Chrysler A518 snap ring of some thickness. Usually I end up using between the 75 thou and the 88 thou snap rings. That's typically what I end up using, and I try to aim for somewhere between 60 and 80 thousandths on high performance builds for the intermediate clutch. In other words, if the clutch is going to see a lot of high RPM in first gear, then I want to protect it from drag. So I'll open up the clearance to about, like I said, between 60 and 80, with 70 thousandths being my target. And if I'm looking at this, based on the thickness of snap ring installed, I'm thinking he has about that. Okay, so you notice there's a notch cut in for the case saver, and then he's got some blue plates in here, so let's take a look. I mean, he spent a good amount of money on this transmission. Let me zoom out a little bit. A good amount of money on parts, quality parts. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the 4 and 4 stack up. Very nice. And this may be a modified factory plate or maybe a forged plate. It's actually not one I've seen before. I typically use the Sonic's plates for intermediate for all my 4L80E high performance builds, but this one doesn't look familiar to me. Alright, so you see the case saver in there. Oops. That spins freely, so the sun gear shaft bushings were either clearanced or they fit perfectly upon installation, but this is the kind of spin you want to see when you're manipulating your your main shaft like that. I mean, even if the bushings are a little tight on install, as soon as you run the engine and everything starts rotating and moving, any little bit of tight spot, if you will disappear pretty much instantaneously. So let me get that snap ring out of there. And the snap ring's beveled, and you guys watched enough of these videos to know that by now, but just in case you didn't, this first 4L80E video you watched, the center support snap ring is going to be a beveled snap ring, and you want to have the bevel facing up toward you. So there's the bevel, faces you or faces front. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and get my tool so I can hoist that gear train out of there. We'll take a look at it real quick, and then that'll be basically the end of the video for the disassembly portion. Alright, I'm going to have to clean everything off, particularly the stator support and the valve body, so that I can go ahead and vacuum test to see if I can learn anything there. But like I said, I'm somewhat confident to pretty confident, like pretty sure, you know, what's his face, you know, I'm drawing a blank, but basically you want to be fully sure, not pretty sure, is my point. Alright, so he's got the Sonic's no walk bushing installed in the back of the case. If I can get that angled, and then we'll zoom in. And then he's got the TH350 pump bearing installed in the correct orientation. I mean, it's very, very difficult to know what his rear end play was at this stage. Here's our Sonic's case saver, our fretting ring or anti-fretting ring, protect the case from the center support reacting against it. Our band, this is the original band. I think the band that he tried to install brand new is defective. This band looks in very good shape. Oop. Once again, forgetting to zoom out. Now the band looks in good shape. If you want to reuse your band, just check the apply points right in here. This is where, if you're going to have problems, it's going to be at these two areas or locations here on the band. And that's where application force comes in and where it pinches the drum and grabs it. I mean, the whole band, to be clear, grabs the entire circumference of this planet, but the apply points are where I just pointed out. Alright, so it looks like he's got a mixture of sealing rings here. So we have two of the plastic style sealing rings. You'll notice he left the second from the top sealing ring off to facilitate the direct clutch quote-unquote dual feed mod, and then he's got a one-piece Teflon ring here. So either one of these rings are fine. I mean, like if he ran it like this and drove it, he would have had no issues. Okay, you'll notice he has a heavy-duty retainer plate for the intermediate clutch return spring set, all 12 return springs, probably high rate. So again, a lot of thought went into part selection here that I could see. I mean, he invested the money, he did his homework, he did his research, and you know, he did everything as he needed to. And as I said, he followed my videos for the most part as a you know, as a guide to help him through this rebuild. So here is roller clutch rotation. It freewheels counterclockwise and then locks clockwise. So when you spin it, you'll be bringing the planet with you, but you spin it counterclockwise, the planet stays still, assuming you hold it. Alright, center support washer, a new low roller clutch assembly, planet looks good. And then this is our front sun gear to center support thrust bearing. This goes here, and then you have the other bearing half, or bearing race here. So this is a brand new bushing here in the center support, a brand new bushing here on the planet. Let's take a look at the sun gear and the sun gear shaft. Bushings are brand new. You see the little bit of tight spot that happened. That gets clearance immediately, and it does no harm whatsoever to the workpiece or the bushing. Alright, sun gear looks good. You want to check splines. Okay, you see this ID groove here. This indicates a 99 and up sun gear shaft. So the sun gear shaft, the rear sun gear to rear ring gear bearing assembly should have a 41,000 shim, and that shim is to recenter the sun gear with respect to the two planetary carriers. So we'll check these planets. Okay, you want to check vertical play, check for side play, and then spin it, make sure it's not making any noise. Okay, they all seem good. I gotta check that overdrive planet too. Check your band surface. This looks perfectly fine. I mean, this planet can go right back in. No need to do anything with it. Alright, I'm gonna need to shift the camera over because I have to put this thing in the hole in the bench so I can remove the snap ring that secures the output shaft to the rear ring gear. But notice here he put his bronze thrust washer, 4-tab washer here in this location. It's what I do as well. That gives a little bit more resilience to any kind of overheating that might occur that could potentially disfigure or damage or partially or fully melt the plastic thrust washer that goes here, and they're exactly the same thickness, the plastic one and this one. All right. I think you have a good view, so let me go ahead and grab a screwdriver. Alright, so we have a new bushing installed here in the output shaft. Appears to be okay. Journal appears to be okay, as do the lugs. Spline's look in good shape. And we have our third Torrington bearing assembly here. And he installed it exactly how it needs to go. So he's got the 41 thou shim and then his bearing. And you'll notice here, you see the cutouts in the lower half of this bearing, as well as those on the shim. That allows for lube passage at these cutouts here in the ring gear to pass through. If you installed an early bearing assembly, say from a TH400 or 91 to 96 4L80E, you would choke off lubrication there, and lube oil would not get to where it needs to go, and you'd have problems in the back of the case. It might melt down. I mean, who knows? All right, let's check this planet. Alright, appears to be in good order. Check your teeth here on the ring gear, check the structure, and then do the same inspection for the rear ring gear itself. You're checking teeth, you're checking structure. This journal can be cleaned up with some sandpaper. So everything here looks in perfectly good shape. Let's grab that bearing. Alright, so we have the bearing. Let me see if there's a shim back here. I think there is. I think there is. There is, but it's not responding to the magnet. Ooh. What in the world kind of shim is this? Alright. So this appears to be a differential shim, which is perfectly fine. My guess it's for either a pinion bearing or a carrier bearing for differential. But it works well here. So we'll see if that shim, if it goes back in, yields the correct end play for the rear, which is like I said, 4 to 22 thousandths for higher RPM, high performance. I like to see between 6 and 10 thousandths. That's what I try to manage to. Let's get this rest of this fluid out of here. Get this planet out of the way. So check your case, your case bores for your servo piston for low reverse, as well as coast clutch band. The bores, if they're nicked up, will cut your seals. So it's rare I see that. I mean, usually when I do, it's because there was some sort of catastrophic failure, usually for torque converter, and just fine metal went everywhere inside the transmission and squirt up the bores. That's usually when I see it, but most of the time they're fine. Okay, big, heavy, ungainly case. All right, made it to the end. So if you made it this far with me, thank you so much, as always, for watching. Just a real quick summarize the key takeaways from what we learned here during the teardown inspection phase, and how this can be used to, help you avoid these kinds of situations yourself. So I will say straight away, for a first-time build, especially a performance-oriented 4L80E, which is not easy for anybody, I don't care how long you've been doing it, but especially for someone that has never rebuilt one of these transmissions before, the customer did a pretty good job. Okay, outside the pump assembly, I think he did pretty well for somebody that has never tried this before. This particular unit. So with respect to the pump, this is going to be the most common source of trouble for 4L80Es by far, even more so than the valve body and the main case and other parts of the transmission. It is almost always the case where I need to do something with the pump, as I mentioned during the teardown, and most of the time it's just simply resurfacing the stator support or replacing the pump body. I would say 1 out of every 3 4L80Es you need to replace the entire assembly, and this one is going to be one of those 3. So let's talk about what the builder did well as a first-timer, and then where his opportunities are for improvement should he ever try to do one again. So I think he did a great job overall in terms of research, preliminary planning, groundwork, and all that good stuff. He chose well-made parts by reputable manufacturers. He also knew exactly where he needed to address when it comes to vulnerable areas in the 4L80, which aren't many, but there are some, and he addressed those with upgraded components. So the billet rollized forward clutch hub, the upgraded frictions and steels, and a few other things that we saw as we went through the teardown. Got a nice deep pan on there and so forth. He dual fed the direct clutch exactly as he should, and then he also did all the lube mods that he needed to do, including those to the pump assembly. I mean, he opened up the overdrive roller clutch lube circuit to 125 thousandths in both the stator as well as the overdrive or overrun clutch drum. He also opened up the center support lube for the intermediate sprag, and of course he drilled the line to lube port in the pump cover, and that's kind of where things started to go awry. So he was absolutely right to drill that lube hole. Unfortunately, he drilled it a little bit too big, and it just goes to show that there are some situations where you can have too much of a good thing. You want to keep that hole to between 45 and 65 thousandths. Okay, 45 thousandths, anything less than that, it's like, it's not worth drilling at all. And anything more than 65 thousandths, you do run the risk of having line pressure and line pressure rise issues in the transmission. Looks like he drilled that to, I would estimate, about 100, 110 thousandths, somewhere in there, maybe a little more. Needless to say, it opened that circuit up way too much and caused a massive loss in line pressure and consequently no line rise. So for those of you that are thinking about building 4L80Es yourself for the first time, don't let what you see here dissuade you. This is a relatively simple mistake to learn from. You now know what to do versus what not to do, and it's, like I said, not the end of the world. He will need a pump. The whole thing has to be replaced. I'll be honest, I didn't even bother vacuum testing the stator support. There was no reason to do so. Everything has to come out anyway, and we're going to transfer the Sonex boost valve and spring and whatnot to the new pump once we get it in. All right, I do have to vacuum test his valve body. If I do it in time when this thing goes into production, I'll put an annotation. If you don't see anything, then maybe I'll do a follow-up video and I'll post that. But to kind of wrap things up quickly, overall, other than the pump, I think he did a good job. Not catching the wear on the crescent, I mean, that's not something that a first-timer really, unless they already knew beforehand, would be expected to catch. And even if you watch my videos, and I mention it here, I mention it there, let's be honest, you're like drinking from a fire hose when you're trying to teach yourself how to build these transmissions. And I taught myself how to build them, and back when I was learning, there was like kind of a paucity of information. Here in 2025, here we have the exact opposite problem. Okay, I built my first transmission back in 2010, and yes, you had a lot of information handy, but you don't have anywhere near the amount of info that you have today available at your fingertips. So, you know, in his defense and to his credit, he was able to collate and organize and kind of process all that information to the tune of being able to put this transmission back together. Like I said, outside the pump and arguably the forward drum, where I think you know, he had an opportunity to further scrutinize that inner diameter, he did really well, in my opinion. So, hey, anytime you're doing something for the first time, there's always going to be the possibility you may make a mistake. Hell, I've been doing this for 15 years and I still make mistakes. You know, we're all human. Alright guys, that's a video. As always, thank you so much for watching, greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions, comments, anything below. If there's anything else you want me to cover as it pertains to 4 LEDs, go ahead and give me a suggestion and I'll see if I can prioritize it and get it done for you. Until then, enjoy the rest of your day or evening and look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks again.